Yeah, none too.
When we have questions, we'll have you repeat the questions.
Okay.
With the microphone in our audience, and then we'll answer.
Got it. Yeah, why don't they stand there?
I'll stand right behind her. You won't see me.
That's very funny.
I think if we press the button to turn the mic on. Is that mic on?
Not yet.
Can we get a mic check?
Oh, sure. Testing.
There we go.
1,
Thank
2.
you.
Testing.
All the cameras ready?
Mm-hmm.
Ready when you are.
All right. Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming, especially on kind of short notice. We appreciate the support from our entire community. We know that there's been a lot of information out there about some options we are considering that we've been talking about, specifically because we do know that as a school district, we will be facing a pretty heavy budget deficit for the 22-23 school year. It's also true that the last few years we have also had deficits. What's not available to us anymore is the fact that we have had a healthy reserve and we've been able to pull from that reserve. We're now at a point that we would be out of compliance with our policy should we propose a budget for the 22-23 school year that would not be a balanced budget. So our first priority is to ensure that we're really being mindful of our fiduciary responsibility to our public. With that said, one of the options that got a little prematurely communicated out there, which I think is still really important that we over-communicate rather than not communicate, was the fact that we are looking at ways in which to reduce some staff. We do have more staff than our students are enrolled. As you may recall, we projected about a 77,000, slightly over 77,400 student projection of enrollment, and we're slightly below 75,000. So that also added to our deficit because our revenue was projected based on the 77,000. So after a lot of communication and engagement by our community, I'm very, very fortunate to be working and serving in Austin ISD because we do get a lot of feedback. And that feedback is important for us to take to the team and to really think hard about some of what we're hearing. So one of the options that we were considering originally was possibly reducing the classes that we offer at the secondary level from 8 periods in a block schedule to 7. We have gotten together, we visited with principals last Wednesday, and I wanted to lower everyone's anxiety and let everyone know before the winter break that we would be maintaining an 8-period AB block schedule for all of our secondary schools, which almost all of them are currently utilizing, including a 1 condensed day, which many of our campuses call a C day. So we'll use that C day, however, to ensure that all of our teachers, including elementary, that all of our elementary teachers also have a 1-hour embedded time during their school day to do professional learning. That's something our elementary teachers have not had, and so we want to include them in some of that additional planning time. In addition to that, while we have a lot of significant budget challenges, we also have to recognize that we have a group of employees, staff members, our team members, who have been dedicated to our district. And so currently our classified staff starting salary is $13.50 an hour. In our budget process development, I will be proposing that we go from $13.50 to $16 an hour. That will include adjustments for individuals that are in that pay range. So all classified staff, nearly 2,000, a little over 2,000 employees, will be eligible, actually will be getting a raise of some sort. It will vary depending upon the range that they're currently in. But our proposal, and I want to emphasize it's a proposal because during the budget process, as you all may recall, only a school board approves the budget, not the superintendent, but we do bring the proposal to our school board members. And while we're still far away from June, which is when the board would be taking action on our budget, it's important right now, because of everything that has happened during this time with the pandemic, that we communicate as much as we can, because we want to keep all of our staff members. So again, I want to reiterate, we'd be going from $13.50 an hour to $16 an hour as a minimum for our classified staff, with the related changes and increases to individuals that are above the $13.50. When we talk about budget cuts, we have to start at central office. So since August of 2020, we have reduced approximately 60 positions, which saved us about right under $5 million. $4.8 million was saved beginning August of 2020. We're going to more than double that at central office. We'll be reducing some additional positions that will need to add up to 11.8 million, or almost 12 million. Central office has to lead when we have these types of budget constraints. We cannot ask campuses to do something that we are not willing to lead and to model first. We're going to utilize those savings as a means of also funding one other group of employees. I'm going to be proposing a 2% increase for all of our teachers. They certainly deserve more, but just because we can't give them everything that they deserve doesn't mean that we shouldn't do our very best. And while we have a very tight budget and we're going to have to find savings, we also can't do that without recognizing that the teacher is the program of our school district. Teachers are what make our district run. And so we will be utilizing the savings from the central office cuts to fund a 2% increase for teacher salaries. In addition to that, after increasing the 2% of the midpoint for all of our teachers, I'm also going to propose in our budget and ask the board to approve $1,000 across the board increase in teacher salary schedule, the actual base pay, so that we can be more competitive with all of our surrounding districts. For some teachers, that might equate to 4% or even more, depending on where their salary schedule is. That will be almost a few more than 5,000 teachers that would be receiving the 2% raise plus the salary schedule of $1,000 for each of the ranges for our teachers. We heard loud and clear from our community. They want to make sure our students have as many options and electives as available. And it is important that we hear from our community and that we take stock of what we're hearing, because we are here to serve. We will be needing to make some tough decisions in order to meet the needs that we've heard from our community. We know we can do that together. We will still need to reduce some staff members, and some of that will affect campuses. However, those we'll find those through attrition. There are enough positions that are vacant. We will need to be more effective with our master schedules at the secondary level so that we can have more balanced class periods. We know we have some classrooms that may be at 30, 32, 34, and we also have a lot of classes that are at 10, 12, or 14. So we'll be working this spring to ensure that for the 22-23 school year, we are more effectively supporting our campuses. I don't want any staff member to worry about losing their job at the campus level whatsoever. All of those positions, we will find a way to make sure everyone keeps their job, and that's why it's important that we let everybody know before the winter break. We will have the 8-period day, and we will we'll begin with cuts at central office, and then we'll work with each of our campuses to make sure that our staff is aligned to the number of students that we serve. I think those are probably all of the highlights that I have, and then I think we can take some questions.
Does all this shuffling, does this result in a balanced budget?
It will by the time we're done. We're not done with all of the shuffling. Let me repeat the question. I'm sorry. I was asked to repeat it so that everyone will be able to hear. Will all of this shuffling give us a balanced budget? It will, but we're not done with the shuffling yet. We still need to sit down and really roll up our sleeves and work each of our, particularly our secondary master schedules, and ensure that we'll have all the staff that our students need, as well as doing it in the most effective and efficient manner.
I want to make sure I understand it correctly. At this point, doing cuts at central office allows you to give raises, correct? It doesn't help you.
Correct.
Address the
So,
deficit.
yeah, let me repeat that, Claire, to make sure that,
Yeah.
so the question is around, so the cuts that we're making at Central are really not going to have an effect yet on the overall budget, and the answer to that is correct. The cuts that we'll make, at Central will help us to fund the raises that we know we need to give. Like, I cannot in good conscience continue to ask classified staff to come to work for $13.50 an hour. And even though the budget is very constrained, we cannot ask our folks to do that any longer. It's just something that I personally cannot do, and our board members have also been pressing to make sure that that's a group of employees that we really find a solution for first. The second group are teachers, because teachers have, of course, as we all know, have undergone, all of us have been through the pandemic, but everyone hasn't dealt with the pandemic in the same way. So teachers have, of course, been the front facing for our students, and we want to ensure that we provide something meaningful to them. We will still need to ensure, what I am saying is we are still generally overstaffed by about 300 teachers district-wide, but we also have a lot of vacancies. And so we need to, they're not always in the right place though. So a lot of this has to do with us supporting the campuses in the early development of their master schedules, so we get the teachers in the right place at the right time. We also want to make sure that by announcing what we're doing with teacher salaries, that we could also ensure that we recruit teachers. But more importantly, we want to keep our teachers in Austin ISD as well.
So if it's not coming from campus level staff and you already have a plan for central office staff, what are other things on the table that could help you with the deficit? The press release still said something about $21 million being saved, so where does that come from?
Well, it's still going to come from campus
Okay.
to some extent, but it'll come from vacancies rather than saying, what we know is if we don't do something proactively with regard to how we're going to find the money to start to not have an unbalanced budget, because that's what we basically have. We have revenue that we take in and we spend more than the dollars that we get. So what we have to recognize is for the number of students, so take even this year, we staffed for 77,400 students, but we actualized right under 75,000 students. So that means we have more teachers, more staff than the number of students that we have. However, we also have quite a few vacancies, somewhere in the number of about 150, somewhere around 150 vacancies currently. Now that doesn't mean that that particular vacancy isn't needed. What it does mean is we need to recognize there are some other positions on there that we didn't fill all of the classes to maximum numbers, and then we have a specialized position that's still there that had we designed the master schedule differently, we would have been able to cut one position that happens to be vacant right now. So we have to make sure we fill them in the places we need them, and that we're more efficient and effective with the ones that we do utilize. But we, on average, get about 500 to 600 teacher resignations each year. We anticipate that might even be greater because of the pandemic and the great resignation that's been going on in all industries. So we feel very confident, I feel very confident. A teacher does not need to worry about their job, is at the end of the day. They don't need to worry about that. We may have to shuffle people around because we might have to meet student needs, but everyone will be able to keep their jobs. And that's exactly what we're working towards, is we don't want to end up in a year where we haven't been fiscally responsible because they're really tough decisions and no one wants to make them, including me. But it's something that I have to do as the superintendent, but I need to do it in as painless a manner as possible.
What kind of jobs are you going to eliminate at central office? Is it going to be a layoff situation, or how does that work?
So initially, it'll be still through attrition as vacancies. So as an example, right now, we have a number of vacancies at central office, and the team will say, can I fill this position? And I say, no, we got to figure out. I think they've heard no quite a bit these days. So right now, it's actually, you have to come and convince me why that position is mission critical. So essentially, I have a hiring freeze at central office, and we are evaluating each department. And then we'll decide, is there a group there could be maybe 10 to 15 individuals in our central office that positions may be eliminated at the end of the year. They would be notified in January that would be taking place. And then we'll work with them to see if there might be another position somewhere else in the district that is vacant, that is still being filled, that they might choose to apply for.
When you're talking about the student population decreasing, does that have the impact of making it more expensive per student for the school district?
Well, at the end of the day, it's not. You get a per pupil revenue generated, but it's in how we project that. So if we project that we're going to have X and we don't have X, but that's what we pretended we were going to have, then we're going to have more positions that we need. So then in essence, what I've done is I've added expenses based on a projection that we didn't fulfill. So part of what we need to do is we need to be tighter with our projection of our enrollment so that we don't overly estimate that we need this many staff members and then get in the situation that we're in currently, which isn't new. This isn't new, and we're not the only ones, of course, but Austin ISD is the community I serve and is the community I'm responsible for.
I guess what I'm asking is, for instance, in operating a classroom, there's certain fixed costs, whether there are 10 students in a classroom or 20 students in that classroom. Lights still have to come on, the roofs still have to be cleaned, etc.
Well, I think what challenges we have with regard to class sizes just have to do with the fact that they're very varied, V-E-R-Y and then V-A-R-Y. So we do have some classes that are at 22, and then we have some classes that are at 10. But overall, we're still, in terms of significant gains from how many classrooms we're actually operating, that really wouldn't create the number of millions of dollars that we're in deficit for. I think when we're in a smaller deficit and you're looking for $4 or $5 million, you can make some of those types of approaches, and we'll need to do some of those. But those aren't going to generate, we're talking, so we presented last year a budget deficit that our board approved, which meant we had to go to fund balance to balance it, of $44 million. And then we're approximately 3,000 students short of our projection, with each 1,000 students representing about roughly $6.1 million lost revenue. So you take the 6.1 and multiply that by the 3,000 students we were short. So you can see that that's approximately 18.3 million. So I just rounded and said 18 plus the 44 gives me a $62 million budget deficit. So that means we cannot just carry over the same budget that we had last year, or we're going to find ourselves $44 million short. And I need to not project overly enrollment. I need to be more conservative with our enrollment figures. We need to be tighter. Other questions?
School funding in the state of Texas has always been a skill of the snakes. Is there other options for revenue? I've seen school districts, I've read stories around the country, school districts find, creative ways to find new revenue. Have you guys poured over some of those things?
Well, we certainly have the question about, are there more creative ways to do so, to find savings? There are multiple ways to find savings, and in every situation you have to ask yourself, is this something we're willing to give up? Because at the end of the day, when you're finding cuts, no matter how creative they are, they're affecting either stuff or staff. Stuff will never add up in a district this size to $62 million. As much stuff as I would, okay, we're going to cut out, whether it's the amount of copies that are made at central office or the copies that are made at campuses. And so when you start to add things up, again, based on the gravity of how much the deficit is that we have right now, I think is going to take multiple ways in which we're going to problem solve. It's not just going to be one thing. And on top of that, not only are we trying to fill that $62 million in deficit. But remember, we are committed to bringing the board some raises for at least two groups of folks, our classified and our teachers.
How much of this, I mean, you guys are subject to recapture, right? I mean, are you guys sending out?
We pay the largest check. We have the largest check that goes towards recapture. And certainly that's a systemic issue. There are far more districts now that have to pay into recapture than originally was created. And it's definitely something that I think many of us would be interested in revisiting. As you all know, the courts have said it's not great, but it's legal, right? And so at the end of the day, what I have to do, though, is make sure that I don't conflate the two. We still get the same dollars per kid in Austin ISD than pretty much every other urban or suburban school district does as well. So while we're writing a bigger check, what that really says is a larger portion, though, of all of Texas funding comes from Austin's ISD's property values. And so it's those dollars that are generated, which many people are like, okay, I'm paying all these dollars into schools, where's my money? And I think that's a question that lots of people should be asking, because I do want to assure our folks the checks that we're writing, including myself, for our school taxes here do not come to Austin ISD. But that's probably a different press conference than this one.
Last question?
Can you talk about the common planning time? What will that look like?
Sure. Yeah, the common planning time is going to be, so for instance, if school lets out, and I'm going to use this time because we're going to meet with principals on Wednesday to get down to the brass tacks of how it'll work. But generally, if school, let's say at secondary level, ends at 4:30, then one day out of the week, school will end at 3:30. So that 1 hour, so it's not a half a day, it's just a condensed day. That 1 hour, teachers will actually have embedded to do common planning throughout an entire campus. This will allow all of our teachers to get that additional planning time. Right now, I want to emphasize only secondary teachers have had an additional planning time. Our elementary teachers have not. So it's pretty straightforward, and this will give both elementary and secondary that additional hour. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Ed, Leslie, and Anthony, you guys can hang out.